Welcome again to Sunday service. So today's topic, who are the true Christians? As I was reflecting on it, the first thought came to me, to my mind was, what qualification do I have to talk about this subject? It's pretty obvious by how I look that I may not even be a false Christian. But I could be a true Christian, or at least trying to be. So I thought, well, maybe let me do my best here. But all kidding aside, today's reading, as you saw, was a little bit complex. Not so much complex, but very, very profound, and it's easy to miss the essence of it. But it's basically saying that the teachings of Jesus, and as to the teachings of all true religions, can easily be distorted when it comes through the lens of the ego, despite best intentions. That's the essence, and that gives us the insight to say, if we actually practiced what Jesus said, we'll all agree that that's probably the perfect definition of a true Christian. It should not be controversial. If we actually did that, what would that look like, and what's standing in the way? So I'll structure my talk that way. Just as you can ask who are the true Christians, you can also ask who are the true Hindus and who are the true Buddhists, and because delusion is equally distributed. And this reminded me of an incident that happened in my family probably, 40 years ago. So I was pretty young at the time. And the whole thing revolved around a particular dish that we prepare. It happens to be my favorite dish. It's a lentil donut. It's a fried, spicy lentil donut. Okay, if you go to an Indian restaurant, it's called as a vada, V-A-D-A. And the reason this became a large point of controversy was as follows. I grew up as a Brahmin. Now, Brahmin is not a monolithic thing, just like Protestants are not a monolithic thing. There is a bunch of types of Brahmins. And I tried to count it. I even asked ChatGPT, and ChatGPT gave up, at which point I knew we had reached the end of human intelligence. So I didn't count it. But my conservative guess would be there'd be 25, 30 types of Brahmins, of which I belong to one, the best one, obviously. But my sister fell in love with a man who was another type of Brahmin. And it took my father a couple of months to get used to the idea. This was okay. He made peace with this particular brand of mild blasphemy. And then we all went down to my future brother-in-law's house for the engagement. And there we saw these lentil donuts being prepared. They had a 3-story house, and in each story a grinder was running with the obvious smell of the dough that would eventually be fried in the form of a donut made of lentils. I was very happy because I liked that dish a lot. But for my father and my grandfather, this was the last straw. And the reason was because in my particular kind of Brahminism, which comes from a guru, mind you, these lentil donuts are prepared only when somebody dies, which is why I was happy to see it, because I didn't get to eat it. You don't see that many people dying, thank God. Whereas in my future brother-in-law's house, these lentil donuts are prepared whenever anything good happens, including an engagement for an upcoming wedding. So this was a really big deal, and it ruffled many feathers, and it was a point of doctrinal conflict that is far more serious than it sounds. Anyway, the engagement went on, and now after this many years, my sister and brother-in-law are a very happy couple, to the extent that that term can be applied to any couple. They are about as happy as any couple can be. So lentil donut aside, the whole thing worked out well. But where I was going with this was the two masters who caused this split of Brahmins into two ways actually were coming from a very high place. One of them said the soul and the spirit are the same, aham brahmasmi, and the other one said the soul and spirit are both divine, but you have to reach God through surrender. This was the actual difference, which is very inward and transcendental and so on. But by the time, after 1,000 years had passed, those differences were captured in the form of when you prepare and eat lentil donuts. Okay? This is how all teachings, when it comes through the lens of the ego, we tend to hold on to that which is the most outward, because it's very easy to attach feelings of anger and denial and fulfillment and likes and dislikes to outward things, because no change is required. All we need to do is to say, how dare somebody prepare a lentil donut on this occasion? You know, that's very easy, because that's how the ego steps in between the teacher and the teachings. Is it comes in and kind of changes it this way. Every Sunday, we begin with the reading, and the reading begins with truth is one and eternal, realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. This, for those of you that are new, every Sunday this is how the reading begins. Truth is one and eternal, realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. And it occurred to me that this captures, through Christianity, in probably the most pithy way, Jesus himself, you know, truth is eternal. Jesus himself said, I didn't come to give you anything new. I haven't come to destroy the law, but to fulfill it. He's saying the eternal teaching is already there. I've just come to fulfill it, meaning show you what it really means, because I see that it's not being followed properly. Realize it within. Oh, he says the kingdom of God is within you. Lo, not here, lo, not there, but kingdom of God is within. And then he said, realize oneness with it. I and my Father are one. And the essence of it has not changed. And Krishna did the same thing. He had other reasons why he needed to refresh the one and eternal truth, and Buddha had another reason why he needed to refresh it, and Yogananda had a reason why he needed to refresh it. But the fundamentals of what is being asked of us has never changed, and how can it? Because the nature of delusion is the exact same for everybody. It's a veil on the consciousness. So if you got consciousness, you got a veil, and the veil is made of the same material. There is no difference. And what we need to do to remove that veil is at a high enough level, exactly the same. And Jesus defined what that was. And this comes in the Gospel of Matthew. This is after the Sermon on the Mount, and then he's entered the Temple of Jerusalem. And the Pharisees are these guys, they are the stewards of the law. They are kind of the keepers of the flame, or at least they thought so. And they saw a disruptor walking through their temple, and they didn't like it, but they knew that the crowd was for Jesus, so they didn't want to go and do anything overt. So in, I think it's chapter 21, where they begin to play some shenanigans. They send people to trap Jesus using words. So these people end up asking him a whole bunch of questions, and of course, how can you trap Jesus using words? He answers them back. And then finally, the Pharisees themselves come, and they are, at the head of them is a lawyer. And the lawyer ends up asking, what is the greatest commandment of the law? He just wants that one thing. And then Jesus answers, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Pay attention. The second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. And it's kind of a seminal moment. It's The question has been asked and an answer has been given, and the answer has resonated across time. Anytime the one and eternal truth is distorted through the lens of the ego, the actionable thing that one can do is love of God and love of your fellow man and woman. And we can again agree that this captures the spirit of Christianity. The spirit of service, for example, can be traced back to this particular statement of Jesus. There is, growing up in India, there was once I got into a conversation with my mother about my own birth. I think at some point all children have that kind of a conversation with their mother. But eventually that conversation came to a particular fact where my mother said, well, after you were born, I caught an infection, so I had to stay in the hospital for several days. I say, nice little factoid for me. It's good to know. And then I asked, well, did it happen with your other children? And she said, no. And I said, why? And she said, because they were all born in a mission hospital and you were born in a government hospital. And that said volumes for me at that time and the place. Mission hospital, of course, is a hospital run by Christian missionaries. And they insisted on a standard of cleanliness and washing of hands and so on that were much higher. And we always grew up with the sense that by and large, mission hospitals gave you better health care. And this spirit, and for me, as the recipient of these words, Christianity and Jesus had nothing to do with it. Faith without works is dead, as it says in the Bible. And it's the works that capture the spirit of Christianity, all the way from Jesus' answer to the lawyer that was at the head of the Pharisees. That spirit has been preserved all the way into the mission hospitals of Bangalore in the 1970s and 80s. And the same thing with the forgiveness being a big deal, the love and the softness, all of those that embody the spirit of Christianity, they come from there. But the reality, of course, is distorted. You need to dig deep to see these virtues, sometimes not so deep, but when you look at the overall landscape of Christendom, it's not always like this. How many wars, of course, have been fought in the name of this? How many times have the teachings of Jesus been used to emphasize a difference? I came from India straight to Kansas, and I was really so enamored. Enamored is not the word, it goes far beyond that. So fell in love with the teachings of Jesus when I came. And of course, if you are in love with the teachings of Jesus, Kansas is not a bad place to be. And my university organized, my computer science department had a Bible study of its own, and I attended it. And one of the things that came up in the Bible study, remember, these were all, 60% of them were full professors in computer science, and about 40% of us, generally, we were graduate students. In other words, the level of erudition and scholarship and presumably at least one form of IQ was relatively high in this room. And one of the professors actually had a question that was bothering him. And the question was this, that he said, it says in the Bible to give to your Christian brother, but then the United Way, which this professor was planning to give to, is well known for giving money to non-Christians. So should I give my money to them or not? Because it might go to my non-Christian brother. See, and this was he was a wonderful man. Certainly, I cannot judge his good intentions. I mean, I don't think any of us can. But where is the disconnect? How did it go from there to here? And we fall short of this, not just this professor. I just used him as a convenient foil, but the same is true for me, and I dare say that the same is true for all of us. When we look at it, the teachings take an odd distortion when it comes through our inner lens, and it all comes back to this. It's the ego's tendency to claim credit for itself. Let me unpack that for you a little bit. Even in Jesus' time, the thing that he was complaining the most, especially during the end of his ministry, was that the Pharisees were more interested in rituals and in tithing and in long prayers and things like that. And the quote from the Bible is they craved for a place of honor at banquets and important seats at synagogues. This happened in biblical times too. They were drawing the devotion of their congregation to themselves. You see, and it's the exact same thing has persisted all through, and it will never change, because that is the nature of delusion. There was one, yoga, hatha yoga, the asanas that we do, they've always been present. It came through the intuition of some people who knows how many thousands of years ago. And even 2 decades ago, there was one yoga teacher who actually trademarked all of the asanas. He did make a contribution to that, and I have practiced his version of the asana sequence, and it's pretty extraordinary. But then surely it's not to claim credit for himself. If that sounds something that you or I wouldn't do, is it really the case? Certainly I cannot claim that for myself. Sometimes you serve or you do something, then you say, why haven't people noticed it? Now that is drawing the fruits of our actions back to ourselves, is it not? Regret is the same thing. It's just the other side of the coin. I was listening to a talk given by Jaya, one of the founding members of Ananda, and he said, I can think about letting go of my desire, but it's much harder to let go of my regret. And that gave me pause. But they are both two sides of the same thing. The fruits of our actions, whether good or bad, the fundamental tendency in all of us is to draw it back to ourselves. There begins the slippery slope. Eventually, you will end up with what Jesus was saying about the Pharisees, or this man who tried to trademark yoga, or each of us in our relationships with other people, or in our relationships with God, and so on and so forth. But if we go back, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, the word all is what's important here. This ego's tendency to draw this to itself means at least a part of our love goes to ourselves. We only give the leftover to God, and if anything else happens to be left over, to our poor neighbor. Often they come last in this sequence of priorities. But that's really what takes, say, the difference between soul and spirit and brings it down to a disagreement over lentil donuts. That's really the linchpin there. There is, in one of the Upanishads are these, they're called Vedanta. They are the end of the Vedas, which form the base teachings of Hinduism. In one of the Upanishads, there is an example given of two birds. It says that on a large tree, the tree was so large that it seemed like a world unto itself. It had leaves and fruits, and some fruits were sweet and the other fruits were bitter, and so on. And on that tree, there sat two birds. Both of them were resplendent with golden feathers. One bird, and they were always united. They were close companions. They'd never be apart. But one bird was tasting the bitter and sweet fruits, and it was grieving whenever it got a bitter one and celebrating whenever it got a sweet one. The other bird simply looks on without eating. But when the grieving bird sees the other, it becomes liberated from sorrow. This is a bit of a metaphor to meditate on. There's a bunch of these in the Upanishads. But that's how each of us are. Sitting side by side within our consciousness is the ego consciousness, which goes out and declares that the fruit is mine and therefore is entitled to eat it. And you cannot always guarantee what the fruit will taste like, and is therefore carried on, up and down. But sitting also within us, this is the key, is a divine intelligence that just looks on and say, not I, but you. This doesn't belong to me. You have it. You are the power behind everything I do. And so when the ego consciousness, the fruit-eating bird, pauses for a moment in its eating and looks at its partner and realizes what it's doing, then we come out of the miasma of karma. So it's this beautiful metaphor that kind of gives us a way of true Christianity, adhering to Jesus' teachings. And this is all fine. It's very easy to understand in our heads, but how do you put it into action? There was on, I think, September 12th this year, and every year, we celebrate the discipleship anniversary of Swami Kriyananda. Swami Kriyananda is the founder of Ananda, and he is no longer in his body. He's been a guide and a teacher to many of us here in this room and to tens of thousands of people worldwide, and that is his photo over there. And it occurred to me that he left his body in 2013, and in 2012, we also celebrated his discipleship anniversary, and that was, I don't know, the 64th discipleship anniversary. It's 1948 to 2012, which is, you don't really hear of celebrating someone like Swamiji, who had an influence on so many people. We don't hear of somebody celebrating people like that, their discipleship anniversary. You really don't. And you know why? Because after 64 years, they would have claimed the title of a master, of a teacher. So maybe you celebrate their anniversary of seeing God or some other thing like that, not the anniversary of their discipleship. But true saints are this way. If you study Kriyananda's writing, his music, it feels like he doesn't write 2 pages or 1 page without declaring, this is what I heard my master tell me. Throughout his life, he was an example of how to be a channel, meaning how not to draw the fruits to himself. He spent his life showing us how to be the other bird, not the fruit-eating bird, but the fasting bird. Okay, Master Mahashai, or Sri M, that's his other name, he was a disciple of Ramakrishna. And he writes, he used to give these wonderful, profound discourses or statements. Always, at the end of it, he would end by saying, my master said so. This was how he would always end. There are, within the Indian scriptural writings, there are probably 50, 60,000 pages worth of writings that are all attributed to one man whose name is Vyasa. And that cannot possibly be true. Even if one man is capable of writing that much, why would he? He'd have said everything that he needed to. But it's almost certain, looking at the syntax and the way of writing, that his disciples across hundreds and hundreds of years wrote but attributed everything back to Vyasa. the humility of many saints shows us the way. This is, humility is the wrong word for it, it's attunement. It's, Swamiji didn't so much say, well, I kind of wrote it, but then just to show people that that's the wrong way of thinking, let me just say this is what I heard my master say. That cannot be the case. There's no spiritual progress that way. It is that, and he writes this about this as well, that he would sit and meditate, and then he would start remembering what his master said, or he would ask master for the veracity of what he had written, and he would receive an answer saying, yes, this is good. There was this inner dialogue of deep attunement with the master that took place, not only through his writings, but through his music, and from all indications, every time he wrote a letter, and every time he took a step, and every time he ate and drank and meditated, was always, what would you like me to do? Now, the fullest expression of that is found in Jesus Christ himself. That when he said, I and my Father are as one, what he really means is that the I no longer exists. It is my Father that is coming through me. Yogananda said, I killed Yogananda a long time ago. Therefore, what is coming through me is the will of God. Or the other bird, the one that is a witness, that is the divine intelligence or the Christ consciousness. So there is something that I read in somewhere in one of our teachings. Maybe it's what Swami wrote or Yogananda wrote. He said it's not Jesus but Christ, that he is referring to a state of consciousness that is eventually accessible to all of us. That's the goal of true Christianity, is to ourselves be one with the Christ consciousness. But the way is attunement to Christ or attunement to Yogananda, it doesn't matter. Since this is on Christianity, attunement to Christ, and attunement to Christ really comes from here. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. This is the question, the answer, the methodology, the priority, everything is contained there. And so just a couple of things of how to get there. I've already said, so this is more of a summary, and then I'll end my talk with this. Is the practical way to implement this in our lives is, first and foremost, to say, not me, Lord, you. And it's important to do this with both successes and failures. The Bhagavad Gita says, Sukhe dukhe same kritva labha labhau jaya jayau tato yuddhaya yujyasva naivam papam avapsyasi. And what that means is, whether it's happiness or sorrow, make them the same. Don't claim credit for one or regret the other. And that way, if you face the battle of life, you will no longer create karma, meaning you'll stop eating the fruits and go more like the fasting bird. So that is, and this is something that one can do. We won't be able to do it perfectly, of course, but doing that more and more is a very powerful practice, not claiming credit. Swami Kriyananda has written a book called Sadhu Beware, and it's really a manual on these things. And in one of those, there is a chapter on how to transcend the ego, and he gives 30 different things to do that. And I encourage all of you to read it. They're all very, very practical. And along the same things is also, when you're unsure, ask, what would Jesus do? And there is a reason why that's a bumper sticker. It's a very, very powerful practice. Fundamentally, it removes the focus away from me. You see, that's its superpower. And then it makes you look at a much larger trajectory. And then the last one is, at the end of the day, every day, as you lie down, close your eyes, make a mental bonfire, and offer into that all of today's outcomes. Whatever that might be, the Good ones happen because of your strength, meaning it's not me. The bad ones happen because of the delusion that you created. It's still not me. So I give it back to you. So it's a bit of a practical realization of St. Paul said that every day, I die every day. In other words, I let go of all my identifications with what happened today. So tomorrow is I'm reborn into this. Om Shanti. Amen.
From Whispers from Eternity. I am thy bird of paradise, wishing to fly in thy astral airplane. Thy astral airplane of parting came to take my soul away from this earth. I wondered through what strange skies I would soar now, and to what lands I would travel. I asked the mystic pilot, cosmic law, whither I was to go. That silent one answered soundlessly, I am the pilot of life, mistakenly called terrible death by ignorant earth folk. I am thy brother, uplifter, redeemer, friend, unloader of every gross burden of bodily troubles. I have come to fetch thee away from thy valley of broken dreams to the highlands of light, where poisonous vapors of sorrow never rise. I have broken mercifully thy cage of flesh attachment, that thy soul bird may escape. I have broken thy chains of disease and fear. Thy long encasement behind bars of bones accustomed thee to thy little cage, making thee cling to it fearfully, even when I opened its door. Yet in thy heart thou didst want thy freedom always. Why now art thou fear-filled, having won thy long-craved freedom? O bird of paradise, hop into my plane of omnipresence. Fold now thy fluttering wings, and ride with me peacefully, anywhere, everywhere, in thy ethereal